Well, once again, it looks as though this is one of the better matchups in the SEC and one to look forward to. Florida's back on the map nationally. LSU really never left. It was a great game at Death Valley yesterday. Tigers defeat the Gators 35-28. We bring in David Waters from Gator Sports Radio to help us break it down. And David, this was a situation where you had one of the better defensive units in the country going against most likely the best back. Let's start there because that was the matchup that everybody was pointing to. Leonard Fournette lugged it 31 times for $180. Just your thoughts about Fournette versus the front seven.
Well, the first half, really wasn't good for Florida at all, and basically both aspects, running and passing. But like you said, we'll bring up Fournette first. Yeah, proved once again, he probably is the Heisman front runner. This is, one of the best defenses in the country, and there were parts in that first half where again he looked unstoppable. Whether it was him lining up in a wildcat close short to the goal line and getting into the end zone, or still, and I'll give him every bit of the credit, but that offensive line for LSU, I'm telling you, Florida's defensive line didn't get any push at all. And it was, not until he got to the linebackers or the safeties before he was even touched. But still, even when Florida did get pressure back towards Fournette, he would break the first tackle, break the second tackle, and still get his yards. Don't give me, that guy, he showed, we knew it before. Don't get me wrong. It's not like we thought Florida was going to completely shut him down. But he showed once again why he's definitely one of the best 2-3 players in the nation.
Yeah, and let's talk about the passing attack for LSU because we sized it up before the game last week. And Brandon Harris pretty much did what we expected he would need to do in this offense with this back, with that run blocking offensive line. They don't need 35 out of 45 from him. 13 out of 19. 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 202 yards. And were you a bit surprised that LSU hit on some very explosive plays against Florida's defense?
Yeah, that's what it was. I probably would have taken 13 of 19, but it was the 202 yards, I think, that really got us. And it was the flea flicker that, Florida Vernon Hargreaves was really still in position to make the play and just did it. And that went for, big gain touchdown. And then, but yeah, even when they got close to the red zone, something I thought Ole Miss would kind of do when Florida played them is once they got, within the 20, 30-yard range, they would throw it up into the end zone, and those LSU wide receivers came down and beat the Florida DBs. There was a lot of talk about, LSU wouldn't be able to pass on the Florida DB attack, but the first half of that game, the DBs for Florida really play out of position. And to me, the big when it happened, I knew it. The play right before halftime when LSU, Brandon Harris escaped the sack, rolled out to his right, jumped, threw a miracle, and Dupre came down with it, and Marcus May was completely lost. Had just lost all eye contact with the ball and his man, and LSU made a play right before halftime. And I said right there, it was a 7-point game, went up to 14 right before halftime, and I just really thought that that was going to be the difference, and it really turned out to be.
Yeah, it was a situation where Florida jumped out to a 7-0 lead. LSU came back with 2 scores, but from then on, it was a tie game. Then it was LSU taking the lead, and they basically just counterpunched from there, and it was a very offensive first half. Things settled down in the second half with LSU scoring just on the trick play in the fourth quarter. So your assessment can't be a big surprise, Les Miles pulling out the bag of tricks.
You would think, it's not a big surprise to you, not a big surprise to me, but apparently it was to the Florida coaches and players because it was there. And, Vernon Hargreaves was the right end on that play, and he went straight for the holder, and pass went right over his head. So, yes, I think every Gator fan remembers 2010 when basically almost the same thing happened. And, I think we were all screaming, and I think I tweeted it out right then, concede 3, because I can just figured something Les Miles would do something. So, I would have taken just to play safe and let him get to 3 and take your chances. But the Mad Hatter strikes again.
Yeah, and they pretty much did it in the same fashion that they almost always do it. I know they have a few variations, but it's pretty much the same type of flip pass out to the flank is the way they pull that thing off. I know that they bring it from different directions and they do both sides, but pretty much the same play. And I know it's easy for us to sit here and talk about it, but Les Miles obviously goes to that play and has for about the last 10 years that we know of in the SEC.
Yeah,
Let's flip the page. Let's go to the offense. Treon Harris obviously was a punch in the gut to the coaching staff. It had to be to the team, Florida fans in general. When Will Grier was suspended for what could be a calendar year, we'll see how that suspension plays out. I believe maybe that's been reverted just back to the rest of this 2015 season. Regardless, no Will Grier for the LSU game. Treon Harris statistically played well. Unfortunately, the running game couldn't really support him, and that's what he really needed was the support of the running game.
Yeah, you brought up the running game first, so I'll just go with that. Yeah, Florida finished with 55 rushing yards on 31 carries, and that's only about 1.8 yards per carry, and you're not going to win like that. You're not going to beat LSU like that. Florida still had their chances, though, and going back to Harris, Florida didn't win the game, wasn't going to win the game because of him. It wasn't really going to lose the game because of him. And I know people will point to the last two drives where, and then I think Harris went 2 of 12 over the last 12 passes. But, you can put those last two drives on him, but, he still gave Florida enough chances to win. And like you said, that running game was there, then, Florida probably does pull it out. But, we would like to see Harris play better on those last two drives. And it looked like he was trying to aim some passes, kind of maybe trying too hard. And the very last play of the game, you can't really throw a Hail Mary out of bounds, at least give your receiver a chance. But that's pretty much nitpicking. He kept some plays alive with his feet during the game. I really thought, he, instead of rolling out left or right, he probably should have rolled, stepped up a few times in the pocket and maybe try to find his receiver. But, Harris does keep plays alive. And, I'm telling you, Callaway made a heck of a catch on the sideline where he basically caught it with one hand and kept his feet in bounds. And, Florida's got a star in the making there, of course. And he found Jake McGee. He made some really good reads where he found Jake McGee twice for touchdowns. And like I said, Harris played well enough for Florida to win this game. And it's not on his shoulders. The most disappointing part was how the defense played in the first half. And I think that's more we can put the blame and not really the quarterback.
Yeah, if you line up all the things going against Florida, it's pretty impressive that it came down to the final drive. You're playing one of the 5 best teams in the country, and you're playing in maybe the toughest place to play in the country at night. You're going with your backup quarterback. You're not able to run the ball. As you mentioned, 31 carries, 55 yards. Your best back, Kelvin Taylor, 15 for 25. His longest run was 8 yards. All that going against Florida, and the defense, for whatever reason, gets pushed around by the offensive line. But still, you generate enough explosive plays. Brandon Powell in the punt return game with the 72-yarder for the score, and in the passing game to hang in the game, and it's a 28-all game, and it goes down to the wire, basically.
Right. Yeah, it was Callaway with a 72-yard return.
Yes.
And it was, we just Florida has found a star right there. And, like I said, we talked about him before with the Tennessee play and, the game-winning touchdown there. And he's, the signing day surprise, McElwain better be glad he unearthed that guy because, he's going to turn out to be probably one of the best playmakers Florida's had in recent years. But, yeah, you're right. I mean, Kelvin Taylor, and it's not going to really put that on him. The offensive line, for whatever reason, and it's been an issue all season, cannot run block. And, I really thought with a young offensive line, run blocking would have been, more of what they could succeed in. But it's actually been the pass blocking that they've excelled more in. They're not terrible in the pass blocking. They're not great, but they give their quarterbacks a chance. Martinez Ivy made his first start at left tackle yesterday. So it's, it's, and like you brought up, for everything considered, for Florida to go in like they were with all the distractions of the Grier and suspension during the week and playing your backup quarterback and to go into Death Valley and still only lose by 7, there's no such thing as moral victories. But with this young team, it gives McElwain plenty of ammo to, get into this bye week and move forward.
David Waters joining us from Gators Sports Radio. Georgia's ahead in 2 weeks, so that's a good thing. You get a couple weeks to prepare Treon Harris for the Georgia defense. And as soon as I say this, there's going to be an upset somewhere that may involve, especially it has in the past, the Georgia Bulldogs and them not winning the SEC East, even though they typically beat the team that they need to beat to win the division, but then they lose to other teams that knock them out. And the Gators were one of those teams that kept them from winning the East last year. But it seems to line up that this is a winner-take-all game against the hated rival, the Bulldogs.
Yeah, it's very true, and both teams will be coming off a bye week. Georgia has their bye week, too, after struggling and scoring no touchdowns this past week against Missouri. Georgia Tech got a little bit of quarterback problems, but they probably can look forward to something. Georgia has a good offensive line, and for whatever reason, Florida we're going into last night's game against LSU, leading the SEC in sacks, and didn't get to Brandon Harris once. I'm sure Georgia will look at the film of that and see, maybe if they can kind of copy what LSU's did. But Georgia's really struggling at the quarterback position with Grayson Lambert, and maybe with the bye week, the Mark Richt Company and Schottenheimer maybe come up with something there. But it's really I think, for Florida, this bye week comes at a perfect time. The stretch they played to start the season was a pretty rough stretch. And to come out with only one loss, what we thought of this team going into this season is a pretty good accomplishment for McElwain. But you're right. This is probably going to be Florida-Georgia winner take all in the East. If Florida was to win, it pretty much wraps up. They have to win one of South Carolina or Vanderbilt after that. And, Georgia wins, Florida would still need Georgia to lose one more game after that. So, Florida really controls their own destiny, and, you don't want to look too far ahead. But with this, Florida was, in a way, kind of playing with house money, with this LSU game. The loss really doesn't hurt in the big picture if they, Florida's probably, maybe, if you kind of look at it, probably going to be favored from here on out. FSU is a home game, so, that may tilt that into where Florida would be favored. So Florida will probably be favored in every game from here on out. And if that plays, if that script plays out and, they go out, get to the FSU, after the FSU game with only one loss, then you're probably going into the SEC championship game against LSU or Alabama. And, the SEC championship game has in the past, set up for a playoff BCS run.
That's exactly right. So regardless of what happened in the national polls that were just released, I would hope that based on this performance on the road with a backup quarterback at LSU in Death Valley, that they didn't drop too much in the rankings. Do we know what Florida's ranked right now?
Coach's poll just did come out right before this, and they dropped them to 14th. So you're right, didn't drop too far at all. So
okay, well, I think they've performed better than the 14th best team in the country, but I'll have to get after my rankings here in the next few hours.
Oh yeah,
right, David Waters of Gator Sports Radio joining us to break down Florida and a loss at LSU 35-28. Very good game, and it sets us up for 2 weeks from now. Georgia and Florida, always a good one, but an especially important one here in 2015. All right, David, thanks for breaking things down.
Thanks, Mark.